Hello, my juicy co-creators. Lita here in Salt Spring Island in beautiful, pristine British Columbia here in Canada with Robert Bateman. I am very excited to spend this moment with you.
I'm excited too, thank you.
Thank you for opening your studio to us and having this inspiring conversation that you feel is really needed. There's a lot of things that we're going to talk about, but mainly around nature, because you're definitely a passionate human being that has a big mission here. Beyond just painting, it is really...
Well, my whole life has been nature and art, the whole thing combined. I can't say which is number one, nature or art.
So tell us about Salt Spring, because we're here on Salt Spring Island. It attracts a lot of artists. What's so special about this place, would you say?
Well, one thing, it has a good climate. It's close enough to places that are kind of cultural centers like Vancouver and Victoria, and transportation and things of that sort. And yet it's an island, so it's a little protected. It's farther away. It was a nice farming island, and it still is a nice farming island. And then of course there were native people here, and then it got settled after World War II by a lot of old, well, they were young English veterans, and their brides came here. And then somehow hippies arrived as a nice place to be, and so right now in Salt Spring Island it's a combination of old English eccentrics, because they've all got old now, and superannuated hippies, I call them. Those are hippies who now have gray hair, but they may still have ponytails, but they still have that alternative lifestyle type of thing.
Yeah.
And that's sort of attracted a lot of artists as well.
Yeah, and just the countryside, the forest, the water, the nature is very present here and very inspiring. That's right,
and it is very peaceful. There aren't very many distractions.
Yeah.
Although we're always disagreeing with each other. One folk singer, Valdi, defined Salt Spring Island is a disagreement surrounded by a body of water. So we always have different things, especially on the topic of, do you want development? Do you want to get more and more like suburbia, which some people do because it makes more money, and other people want to keep it more old-fashioned and more quiet.
And you're active in that. You're an active environmentalist.
Yes, yeah, I'm very active, and so is my wife Birgit. We're kind of active in the preservation end of things and protection.
But what really crushes your heart these days is that children are so much into this virtual world that they are totally disconnected from what's real.
I know, for the first time in the history of our species, of Homo sapiens, it's gone on for hundreds of thousands of years, kids are becoming completely disconnected with nature. It started back in the 1950s when I started teaching high school. I taught high school for 20 years, so I've been observing kids all through these years, and now I got 5 kids of my own and 8 grandkids. And in fact, I was a teacher of kids at the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto back in, well, I was a teenager, so was back in the 40s. And so these, I was teaching the kids all about nature way back then, and I've been doing it continuously. And it's always been a struggle, but now, since the advent of electronics have invaded kids' brains like an alien. And electronics have so much, what you might call sizzle. They just, they hit all the hot buttons that get the kids all stimulated. And I think there's just something stimulating about electronics alone that rewires their brains. And so I'm told that the average North American young person spends 7 hours a day, every day. They don't take the weekend off like normal people. Normal people work 7 or 8 hours a day and they take the weekend. No, they do 7 hours a day, 7 days a week, staring at an electronic screen of some sort. Either, now a cell phone, or all the way up to widescreen televisions. They're looking at an electronic screen, and they're completely ignoring the outside.
They're even scared of it. Even parents are scared of it.
Yeah, which being afraid of the outdoors is a new thing as well. It's gone along with this, and it's completely baseless. It has no foundation. In fact, the outdoors is perhaps the safest place to be. I've heard, though, and I've read that mothers are afraid to let their kids play outside. There might be some dirty old man who's going to abduct them or something. Well, 95% or more of bad guys that are going to hurt a kid are known to the family already. They're the father, the uncle, the man across the street. And besides, kids always played in groups. You probably played outside. I played outside with my friends. I've never heard of a group abduction since the Pied Piper of Hamelin, and that was fiction. So groups of kids don't get abducted. So just have a group of kids playing outside is easy. I don't think kids need adult supervision outside. I think kids need adult supervision inside. Have you ever heard of internet predators?
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of internet bullying? Have you ever heard of internet pornography? Well, those things are all dangerous things for kids' heads. So kids need to be supervised inside. I don't think a young person should have the TV or their computer in their own room. It should be out there where their parents can, you know, be nosy. And I don't think they should, you know, be allowed to do all this kind of stuff and the parents not be aware of what's happening. That's where the adult supervision is needed, because that's dangerous. And little kids, I've heard under the age of 3 should not even be allowed to look at a television set. And now they're used as babysitters. And the thing is, these parents that are allowing their kids to do this, they were babysat by Saturday morning cartoons, by television. And these parents, you know, are now grown up and they're parents, and they think it's the natural thing to do is to have this screen, but now it's just taken over everything.
Yeah.
And so we're getting an increase in obesity, which is increasing diabetes, increasing heart attack problems in young people, increasing depression and suicide, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and bullying. And you can connect it all to not being out in nature. And if kids play around out in nature, these things are made much less of a problem.
But it seems like really the awakening needs to happen within the adults, within us, within the parents, within ourselves, to get closer. Now it's time for us, and to show the example to our children, to spend more time in nature, to learn to hug a tree, to watch animals. I mean, you spend hours and hours, I guess, in nature before starting a painting. You live it, you get absorbed by it.
Yeah, and I do it twice a day, every day. Not as a regular thing, you know, like you take your vitamins twice a day. I just do it twice a day because I've always done it and I can't stop doing it.
Yeah.
But here's what I ask when I'm giving talks, and I give a lot of talks. In fact, this month I'm told I gave 9 lectures. And what I often end up doing, I look at the audience, who are usually adults, there's sometimes a few kids, and I say, I've almost given up on schools, taking kids outside. We're lucky here on Salt Spring. There is a program that gets all the junior high school age kids outside for basically a week each year. But the kids should be playing outside a bit every day. So, but that's better than nothing. But most schools, they don't have the budgets for it, and they're worried about what's called liability, which means what if a kid falls and breaks his leg? Will his parents sue him because he tripped over a branch or whatever? And so they're all uptight because of insurance companies and liability, and you have to fill out all these permission forms and so on. And the schools say, who needs it? Let's just have them look at the screens. It's a lot easier. Just like having your kids babysat by cartoons, it's a lot easier. Cartoons and commercials, by the way. So I say I've almost given up on the schools. But what I ask the audience to do, I said, if you know a kid, and I don't know anybody who doesn't know a kid. Might be your own kid, your grandkid, the kid across the street. Everybody knows a kid. Make yourself a promise that you will take that kid once a week, sometime on the weekend, Saturday morning, Sunday afternoon, unless there's a hockey game, whatever.
We're in Canada.
Take that kid for a 2 or 3 hour hike, and that kid's friends, because it'll be a social occasion, and that kid's friends' parents. It'll be good for the parents too, because they need to get out in the fresh air. the parents, as you implied, are a big part of the problem.
Yeah.
And just do that once a week. It's not rocket science. If they can spend 7 hours a day looking at these screens, how can they think they can't afford 2 hours a week or 3 hours a week?
And that'll make a tremendous difference.
Yeah, it would be easy. Where there's a will, there's a way, but where there's no will, there's no way.
Tell us about your communication with nature. How do you interact with it?
I never thought about that. It's a good question. My interaction is basically always, of course, observing and soaking up what I can. I've from earliest age, I guess from the age of 12, I got serious. All little kids love art and nature. I've never met in every culture, Chinese, Indian, African, whatever, every culture. Little kids all love animals and being out in nature, and they also all love doing art. But most normal human beings grow up around the age of 12 or 13 and go on to more grown-up things, and I have just not grown up yet. And I think it's really unfortunate that the rest of the world grows up in that respect. And so at the age of 12 I got serious. I had I went home from school and did art every day right after school. I didn't hang out with a gang, but I had a little gang hang out with me when I was doing my art after school. And I also had my first bird list. So I had a field guide, a Peterson field guide, and there are now dozens of wonderful field guides. But I had my Peterson field guide, and so when I would see a bird, I would say, all right, is that a chickadee or is that a house sparrow? They both have black throats, but you know, look at, oh, that's just a house sparrow, nothing special, etc. So I would find out what it was, know its name, because you can't really love something or appreciate something if you don't know its name. I remember I used to have arguments with my I used to have hippie students as well, and flower children, and they said, oh, don't snow me with names, man. I don't want to know names. It's a tree. Oh, man. Oh, wow, what a tree. I said, but I want to know, is it a pine tree or an oak tree? It makes a big difference. And what kind of oak tree? If it's a white oak tree and it's north of, that's really special, etc., etc. And I said, so it's as if I come into the class and I say, I love you young people. You're just wonderful. Oh, wow, wonderful. I don't want to know your names. I don't care who you are. You've seen one kid, you've seen them all. But you're wonderful. But it really matters because every kid is a special individual, and every bird is a special individual, and every plant is, and everything has been created. And until we can almost fall in love with them because we know their names, then we haven't got a hope of protecting them. I was asked by a PhD student, a young woman phoned me a couple of months ago and said, should we teach problems of the environment, like global warming, climate change, all that kind of stuff, to children under grade 3? And I never thought about it before, but then I thought about it and I said, no. In fact, I don't think we should be teaching problems of the world, environment, to children in elementary school at all. High school, they could start maybe. The kids kids easily worry, and they worry about, oh, the world's going to come to an end, and all that kind of stuff, and they get it all exaggerated, and it doesn't do them any good. It just does them bad. So I don't think I should teach them any world problems. I've heard that schools have taught kids to know way more about the problems of the Amazon rainforest than they do about the joys of the little woods at the end of the street, the little piece of forest. It's the wrong way around. Forget about the problems of the Amazon rainforest. They can't do anything about it. Other people can, but they can't. Teach them to fall in love with the beautiful bit of bush at the end of the street. We had an interesting thing happen here on Salt Spring Island. There's a little elementary school called Fulford Elementary School, or public school, where our two boys went to school. And in the early days, they didn't have any budget for the teeter-totters and the swings and slides and all that kind of thing. And so the kids just played in nature. And it was just a crummy, ordinary piece of nature, just a bunch of alder trees and small Douglas fir, and there was a little creek, and they'd get all muddy in the creek, and they'd climb up the tree and fall out and get their knees all skinned and everything. And they would come into class after recess all dirty and etc.
And giggly.
Yeah, that's right. And then they got the, happy. Then they got the budget for all the swing set and all that, the jungle gym. And the principal at the time said, immediately they noticed kids' behavior went down. Kids were more quarrelsome in school after recess. They didn't pay attention as well. More fights. A much worse attitude. When they simply played in nature, the kids were, happy and excellent workers. And the other things, the man-made stuff just made them worse. So nature's magic. We know that there's office workers in Japan who are very, office workers are uptight all over the world, but especially in Japan. They're really high achievers.
Yeah.
and their blood pressure goes up, and they get sick, and they can't concentrate, and they have headaches and everything. And so they've got a new thing called forest therapy, where they just take office workers for a walk. That's all. Just go for a walk in the woods. And there's, and believe it or not, all over Japan, right in Tokyo, there's little pieces of forest. And some of them are very old forests around these temples and so on. And so they just go for a walk in the woods for half an hour to an hour, and their blood pressure comes down, their cortisol, which is the stress hormone, comes down, their immune system improves, and they come back to work, and they're way better workers, and it lasts for a week or two more, and then they just go for another hour, half an hour.
That's interesting, because they also do that for animals. They have something called ronron therapy, which is the purring of the cat. And
do they?
They have those places in Japan where they would put few cats, and the Japanese would just go there and have the cat on their lap, and just it will calm them down.
And I've heard that's good for old people too, taking cats and dogs into old folks' homes.
Yeah, very healing in many ways.
Yeah.
So just regarding the animal, when you're connecting with an animal, or how do you to paint them, you take many pictures, you're in an environment, you absorb everything. Do you feel like when you're painting, are you actually kind of in a merging experience with them, or how does it come out so real?
I've got the two things going, and sometimes they're fighting. And one is the design and the lighting and the art. This moose, for example, is based on probably 10 different moose, which I have photographs of. And I turned his head this way because the head was flopped, actually. He was looking out that way, and played around with the legs and the relationship there. The background I took on purpose for this painting in Alberta, when I was in Alberta last fall. And I thought it was kind of a cool idea, because I always like to have a fresh idea, walking through very thin ice, which I hope that works, that it looks like it's just been, it's just been frozen over, and he's just been breaking the ice in that very shallow, probably a beaver pond. And the cow and the calf were there. This is actually my second attempt. My first one, I had the moose over here, and I had the cow and calf over there. I had the bull here and cow and calf there. But I didn't like the composition. And so, anyway, playing with the light, do I want to have the light hitting that or not hitting that? So it's all those kind of compositional struggles, but then again, they have to be realistic with nature.
Yeah, and in the eye of the animal, that's, some artists say that they start with the eyes and then, because the eye is a very complex one, no, to paint? I mean, what? Yeah,
but the eye is very seductive. Well, the eye of a human being is seductive too.
Yeah.
Looking at somebody in the eyes, and the thing is, it's too easy. It's almost like you have ice cream and then the cherry on top, but you just have the whole thing all cherries. It's just or candy icing on the cake. It's too much sweetness. And some of the greatest painters throw away the eye. I mean, they just... So, the links here, I have the...
he is so amazing.
Yeah, I'm concentrating on the lighting here, which was not in my original thing. And here the eye is kind of special, because the lynx is sort of looking up and its head is pointing, so it's looking up a bit. and it's very alert. But eyes are so easy to do. It's so easy to do a sexy eye that it's just it's something I have to hold back on and restrain myself, or it becomes what you might call corny.
They can say so much through the eyes.
Yeah, you can, but animals, especially wildlife, doesn't want to look you in the eye usually. That's too meaningful.
Too intimate.
Yeah, they would. So it's more subtle to throw it away, and I'd rather be a little more subtle than a little more obvious.
Do you have an animal that you prefer?
I generally prefer predators, so I think it's a guy thing. So I like, cats, lions, cheetahs, and eagles, and owls, that kind of thing. Moose are okay; they're kind of macho, but nice, fuzzy, cuddly bunnies and things like that are not so much my thing.
That's very exciting. These ones. Well, how many? You must have painted thousands and thousands of them by now. I mean, you're 81, is that right? 80?
Yeah, I'll be
incredible.
81, I'll be 81
and
next
still
month.
Painting and vibrant and
right. I know I've done 600 and I don't remember what it is now, 675, almost 700 prints, my publishers, and so those will be ones that are more extra special that they think. Of course, publishers are in business and they want to sell stuff, so they're ones that they think are worthy of going out there in the marketplace. And sometimes they print things. I paint a lot of things that never get made into prints as well, because they're too tough or they're too obscure. I know they'll be doing a print of the moose. They may or may not do the lynx.
That's a beautiful one, though.
And they may or may not do the wildebeest and the egrets. Probably won't do those. So, in answer to your question, I don't know how many I've done, but I know I may have done thousands when you count all the little things I've done.
And you want to create your own museum around here? Is it going to be the Bateman's Museum? Is that a project that you're working on?
It's not that I'm creating my own museum. There is a wonderful university near Victoria called Royal Roads University, which I say is the most beautiful campus in the world. It has 550 acres of old-growth forest. It has permanent stream, waterfall, a lagoon, estuary, and a beautiful view of the Olympic Mountains across in Washington State. It's got a castle, well, Canadian version of a castle. It's a 19th century manor house that looks like a castle. And it's dedicated mostly to graduate studies. The average age of the students is 40. So it's, and to sustainability and business and training of mid-career kind of people. And it's a perfect setting because of all the natural beauty for a building we'll call the Robert Bateman Center, and we'll have all the paintings, originals that we own, plus an entire print collection, plus all of my wife's photographs, Birgit's photographs, and it will have programs to try to train leaders. We hope to get leaders in politics, leaders in business, and leaders in education to come and be transformed by the beauty of the natural setting and connection with nature to then go off in their careers and change what they're doing to make the world a better place.
What a beautiful project right there.
Yeah,
Another one.
So the art will be part of it, but it won't be the whole thing by any means.
Transformation through nature.
We hope.
Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
What a delight, so much inspiration, so much juiciness here, my beautiful co-creators.
Juice is what it's all about.
Much love from Salt Spring Island.
Bye-bye.
Bye. And you're active in that. You're an active
Yes,
environmentalist.
I'm very
Yeah.
and so is my wife Birgit. We're
Yeah.
kind of active in the preservation end of things and protection.
But what really crushes your heart these days is that children are so much into this virtual world that they are totally disconnected from what's real.
I know for the first time in the history of our species, of Homo sapiens, it's gone on for hundreds of thousands of years, kids are becoming completely disconnected with nature. It started back in the 1950s when I started teaching high school. I taught high school for 20 years, so I've been observing kids all through these years, and now I got 5 kids of my own and 8 grandkids. And in fact, I was
Hello, my juicy co-creators. Lita here in Salt Spring Island in beautiful, pristine British Columbia here in Canada with Robert Bateman. I am very excited to spend this moment with you.
I'm excited too, thank you.
Thank you for opening your studio to us and having this inspiring conversation that you feel is really needed. There's a lot of things that we're going to talk about, but mainly around nature, because you're definitely a passionate human being that has a big mission here. Beyond just painting, it is really...
Well, my whole life has been nature and art, the whole thing combined. I can't say which is number one, nature or art.
So tell us about Salt Spring, because we're here on Salt Spring Island.
A teacher of kids at the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto back in, well, I was a teenager, so was back in the 40s. And so these, I was teaching the kids all about nature way back then, and I've been doing it continuously. And it's always been a struggle, but now, since the advent of electronics have invaded kids' brains like an alien. And electronics have so much, what you might call sizzle. They just, they hit all the hot buttons that get the kids all stimulated. And I think there's just something stimulating about electronics alone that rewires their brains. And so I'm told that the average North American young person, hippies I call them, those are hippies who now have gray hair, but they may still have ponytails. But they still have that alternative lifestyle type of thing.
Yeah.
And that's sort of attracted a lot of artists as well.
Yeah, and just the countryside, the forest, the water, the nature is very present here and very inspiring.
That's right, and it is very peaceful. There aren't very many distractions.
Yeah.
Although we're always disagreeing with each other. One folk singer, Valdi, defined Salt Spring Island is a disagreement surrounded by a body of water. So we always have different things, especially on the topic of, do you want development? Do you want to get more and more like suburbia, which some people do because it makes more money, and other people want to keep it more old-fashioned and more quiet.
It attracts a lot of artists. What's so special about this place, would you say?
Well, one thing, it has a good climate. It's close enough to places that are kind of cultural centers like Vancouver and Victoria, and transportation and things of that sort. And yet it's an island, so it's a little protected. It's farther away. It was a nice farming island, and it still is a nice farming island. And then and of course there were native people here, and then it got settled after World War II by a lot of old, well, they were young English veterans, and their brides came here. And then somehow hippies arrived as a nice place to be, and so right now in Salt Spring Island it's a combination of old English eccentrics, because they've all got old now, and superannuated